So the COVID-19 vaccine, as we all know, has been granted the emergency use authorization by the FDA. Can you explain what EUA is and how that's different from full approval?
Yeah, and emergency use authorization basically says, allows the FDA to make a judgment based on the prevailing risk of the disease and its consequences in the community, and then say, okay, this is safe relative to that risk that's out there, and this will keep you safe relative to that risk that's out there. And usually after a little bit of time goes by and some additional data is collected, that then becomes a full and formal authorization. I just want to clarify one thing, though. There's no cutting corners, and there really wasn't any cutting corners with respect to the emergency use authorizations that were granted last year around these vaccines. There's a process called VRBPAC. It's a lot of acronyms, but the Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, and they did not in any way loosen their standards or cut corners in deliberations and data requirements around these particular vaccines. In fact, that whole process runs quite independent of any political oversight and interference, and can really be trusted. So, and of course, we see that in the data. I think Washington, D.C. now has had, I think over the last 2 weeks, almost no deaths from COVID as a result of increasing vaccination rates. And so the vaccines are working, and they're proving to be extraordinarily safe relative to the threat of COVID-19.
So the main difference really is that normally someone who's developed a vaccine or a product would go through very rigorous clinical trials, different phases. There are about 3 phases of clinical trials that we go through. And that process is still the same. But what happens with an EUA is that while that vaccine development process is occurring, you can actually start manufacturing the vaccines. So the idea is that this is an emergency. We need to be able to find something that's safe, that's effective, that can save lives. And once it's approved under that EUA process, we have access to the product or to the vaccine, and we can get it out and distribute it very quickly. So that's the process that we've been going through. Companies like Pfizer and Moderna will still apply for the kind of standard licensing process. I believe Pfizer has already applied for that process for their vaccine. And we would expect that others, Moderna and anyone else who gets approved through that EUA process would also go through the full licensing process. But I think it's really important for people to understand that we didn't skip a step here. That the same scientific rigor went into developing the vaccines. The same scientific rigor went into the process of FDA reviewing those data, approving it, and getting it out to people so that we could quickly, avert more deaths, hospitalizations, and infections.